you have a lot of choices when, for your entertainment these days. And there's, 500 channels on TV. And even though the movie theaters are closed right now, they are, you can still watch every movie that's ever been released and every TV show. And there's what you don't have a lot of chances to do, or just at least fewer, is to support theater companies. And, theater has taken a real hit over the last year. And so this is a really easy way to support a company who's committed to keeping artists employed. And so there's that. You can do it from the comfort of your own home. You can do it in your car. You can do it wherever. There's also just the fact that how often do you listen to radio drama? How often do you really listen to radio drama? And now you've got the perfect way to give it a try. We listen to books on tape, and we listen to, like the murder podcasts and all that stuff. But, these bite-sized 20-minute or so full plays, beginning, middle, and end, with really great actors. Why not? It's a great way to spend some time and support a theater company, expose yourself to a different artistic medium. And they're really good. Hi, I'm Sean Abley, and a playwright. And if you want to find out more about my zip code play, 90069 West Hollywood, Brunch Interrupted, watch this video. One of the things that is really great about Antaeus is that as I've been in the company, even in the short time, like 3 years, they have instituted more and more outlets for the playwrights to create. So we've been doing some 10-minute play festivals internally, and they have a reading series called Lab Results. And once the pandemic started and basically live theater shut down, they were looking for ways to keep all the artists, the playwrights and the actors, employed, basically. And they came up with this, instead of Zoom theater, they came up with this great idea for radio theater. So it's we're not like compromising our work by putting it on Zoom. We're actually writing for a medium correctly. So they did round one of they just reached out to the lab and said, who wants to be involved? We're going to pick 6 writers and we'll go from there. And so I wasn't in the first season, as they're calling it. And then the second season rolled around, and I threw my hat in the ring, and they chose me. And honestly, having heard the first season, I'd never written for radio before, or radio drama. It really, I'm glad that I wasn't in the first one, because the playwrights they chose for the first one were so good, and the post-production and the sound was so amazing that then I had the advantage of having all of that as an example. So yeah, so they reached out to us and we said yes. My piece is called Brunch Interrupted. I lived in West Hollywood for 10 years. I watched the city during those 10 years change. And then I live now in Hollywood with my husband, and we've lived in this place for 17 years now. But still, connected to West Hollywood, and I'm there a lot. And a thing that's happening with West Hollywood is it's being sort of colonized by straight people. It was a city that was formed with gay interests in mind. And it was, where the majority of gay bars were in the Los Angeles area. And they had, domestic partnership early, and the city council is, queer people. And so it was this sort of thriving gay metropolis. I mean, people know it all over the country. When you say West Hollywood, they immediately know what you're talking about. But what started happening was the city started getting sold to the highest bidder, and development started happening in the city, and it wasn't necessarily queer centric, and queer businesses were closing because they couldn't afford the rents anymore. I mean, the church, the gay church, moved out of its West Hollywood location because it couldn't afford the rent anymore. And I just thought that was a shame. And so when it came time to write a play about an area, and and I'm always sort of looking for an angle where it can be something more than just a play. It can maybe, be a statement about something that was forefront in my mind. And so the kickoff of the play is, people at a gay bar being confronted by a straight woman who has moved into West Hollywood complaining about noise at a bar. Well, the gay people aren't complaining about noise at the bar. Like that's our thing, right? And then the next thing that I wanted to do is, being a responsible and responsive artist to what's going on in the world right now, I wanted to try to make space for characters of color and artists of color that could be involved. So after initially sort of looking at this problem of straight colonization in West Hollywood, it sort of came to me that if, West Hollywood is a pretty white city, let's be frank. And if you were one of the few Black queer people living in that city, would more white people coming to the city really make that much of a difference? Like, would it matter that they're straight? It would probably matter more that it's just more white influence in a place where you are outnumbered. So, treading very carefully, I decided to make that sort of the crux of my story, that the white character is, their limited experience says, oh, a bunch of straight people are moving into the city and that's bad. And the Black character saying, there's a different viewpoint here that you're not considering because of your limited experience. And, and that happens in a couple. And I wanted to explore when a white person is asked the tough questions, how do they respond? And because I can't do it from the Black perspective, because that's not me, that's not my lived experience, but I can certainly do it from the perspective of a white person who has been challenged and feeling defensive and not knowing how to answer the right way, and then further sort of be of service to the solution. So I set that challenge for myself in this, 20-minute radio play. And, I reached out to a friend of mine, Michael Shepard, who is a director and an artistic director of the gay theater in town, Celebration Theater. And he's also a Black man who I have collaborated with for many, many years. And my friend Parnell Damone, who's a Black actor who I've also collaborated with. And I was humbly handed them this work. And I'm like, please tell me, what, am I on the mark? Am I out of my lane? Whatever. And I think we, I think we I don't know. It's not, I don't want to say it's a perfect solution, but I feel like it's a good start. So the story of Brunch Interrupted is, it begins in the parking lot of the Gold Coast Bar, which is, if you know the Gold Coast Bar, you know that they host this red dress party every year, or they did. Unfortunately, they've closed. But they used to hold a red dress party in their parking lot every year. And it was a charitable event. And, it got pretty raucous. So what's happening at the beginning is the two main characters are Joe and Moses, a couple, interracial couple, are setting up for this red dress party. And there's music playing in the bar. And it's loud music. And a woman, a white woman who lives in the neighborhood, approaches them to complain about the noise. And turns out she's complained several times about the noise, about this bar. And thus starts a conversation with this woman and her entitlement to living in a quiet neighborhood in a city that was not necessarily built for her. They have an argument, and the interracial couple, they sort of settle it in the moment, and the couple goes off to go have brunch. And while they're at brunch, the two of them start talking about this invasion of straight people into West Hollywood. And Moses, who's the Black gentleman of the couple, is not so, worried about more straight people. He's actually more concerned that city's just getting whiter. And Joe, his partner, thinks that he understands, but he's quickly sort of disabused of that notion that he is making the right considerations in this argument. And while they're, as a couple sort of working through that, the woman shows up at their brunch. So once again, she's sort of invading gay space. And the three of them have a discussion that it doesn't solve all the problems because, these are messy issues, but it does help them all understand a little bit more about who's affected and what the stakes are. I am blessed with an amazing team of people on this project, and I pinch myself, quite frankly. When I was writing it, I wrote this piece for certain actors. So I'll just start with Bill Brocktrup, who is the co-artistic director of Antaeus Theatre Company. And I in my head, I always had his voice as I was writing this script, but he's the co-artistic director and he's making the decisions, sort of who's doing these things and who's getting cast and stuff like that. So he wanted to be very careful not to be like, I'm going to take this plum role for myself. But I was like, I got to have you. I really got to have you. And, I've been watching Bill for decades and he's so talented, and I've seen him on stage and I've seen him on screen. And I mean, just like A+ for casting for this. And I got him and he is great. And part of the way I got him was Michael Shepard, who's the director, who is also the artistic director of Celebration Theater here in Los Angeles. But we've known each other since our Chicago theater days 30 years ago. So we've known each other forever. And, he was my first choice to direct this. And when we got him on board, this was before we cast anything, I was like, I want Bill. And he's like, I think Bill would be perfect. And Bill was like, I don't know. And we're both like, no, we have to have you. And so he relented, and I'm so happy he did because he's so good. So Michael, I've worked with forever, and I knew that if I handed something like this to him as, a Black theater artist who has been fighting the good fight his entire career, he would not be shy about telling me where maybe this didn't hit the mark, or was I just completely out of bounds, like even trying to write this, like he would be honest with me. So already now we've established like a chunk of the dream team. Playing opposite Bill is another friend of mine, playing Moses, the Black half of the interracial couple, is Parnell Damone. And Parnell is also, I met him through Celebration Theater, and I don't know, we've just like, we hit it off ages ago. Right. And so I've had him, like when I write a script, frequently I'll just like call actors to come in and like read just so I can hear it. And I've had him do those things. And so yeah, it was really great that we could like get him, and he and Michael have worked together forever. So that was, again, it's like old home week with this. Like there was no surprises. I got to just work with these people that I've known and respect so much. And Parnell also, good friend. And I trusted him to like, tell me the truth about this piece. And then, so the woman in the piece, there's three actors. The woman in the piece is an older white woman who lives in the neighborhood. And there is this amazing actor at Antaeus named Angie Bird. And if anybody has like worked at Antaeus, or anybody in the Playwrights Lab that's hearing me talk about this, they are right now nodding in agreement that she's magnificent actor. And I write for her when I write, like every time I write a little 10-minute piece or anything, I write for Angie Bird. And, the competition's stiff in these things. There's 6 playwrights that are trying to cast their play. And, when I wrote it, I had her voice in mind, and I was like, I need this actor. And I got her. I could not have been happier. She's so good. So yeah. So then at that point, I'm like, well, I can't lose. Like this is, front loaded to be amazing. And then the first time they read it was like, yeah, magic. So, and then the sort of, the icing on, I was going to say the icing on the cake, but actually it's not the icing on the cake. It's like the cake. Everything else is the icing. Jeff Gardner, who is the sound guru, He does so many things. I know that like each one of them would have a name for the position for what it is, but since he's like doing it all, sound guru, sound wizard, sound magician, and I didn't know him personally before I listened to the first season of these plays, but I've heard his work on the various stage readings and things that are broadcast around town. And I didn't know who that was, but then I heard his work on the previous Zip Code plays, and somebody said his name, and then I met him, and he started talking about his credits. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've heard your work for years in Los Angeles. And the meeting with him, when we just went through the script and he would bring things up, and I'm like, oh, right, that has a sound to it. Yeah, he just had such why am I saying he's a pro? Like, why would I even think differently? But he opened my eyes to like the choices that you need to make when you write something like this. So in this whole process, the biggest education I got was from him in how to write toward the medium and then think creatively within that to sort of get past just footsteps, you know what I mean? Or just like doors opening, like think of the smaller details that really create a world in radio theater. I actually went into this thinking, if you're writing a radio play, it's a stage play and you put in sound. Like I thought that was like the brief. And that's not true. It's somewhere between writing a screenplay and a stage play. My process anyway was just writing it. Here's the story. Here's the narrative, beginning, middle, and end. Then going back and taking and looking at all the stage directions where I have movement or things like that, and thinking about, oh, people can't see this. Like what? Oh, well, here's a big thing. The big thing in my play is it's about race on some level. How do you let your audience know that one of your characters is Black? They can't see him. And you can't presume that somebody will like pick it up through their voice, or maybe even you can't presume that somebody will pick it up through the dialogue that you give them. So you have to figure out a way that in a medium where you can't see the performers, how you translate that. And that was one of the places where, when we were rehearsing this, that I looked to Parnell and Michael Shepard to sort of guide me on what would be sort of acceptable language-wise, reference-wise, who would say it, like that kind of thing, to establish that character. And I really love that challenge specifically. But yeah, so there's that, but then there's also knowing that when you change locations, like how does that manifest? Because you don't have lights up, lights down, you don't have set pieces moving on and off. All you have is sound to let you know where you are. And so we had some talks about how do we get from place, so it's interesting. I came in writing one thing, and then my second draft was I'd gone to radio play school courtesy of Jeff Gardner, and went through and refined or changed certain elements, visual elements, into sound. So one of the things, when I wrote this play, and this is just particular to me as a playwright, I always have my eye on something having a longer life than just the one production. So even though this is sort of specific for radio theater, in my head, as soon as this is done, there'll be a version of it that can be done on stage. So I don't want to say it'll be take a step backwards, but it'll be, figuring out how the stuff that I felt needed to be translated to sound can then be sort of switched back to visual for the most part. And yeah, I would love to see it, like, it's kind of killed me not to actually be watching them record it. So yeah, I would love to see it on stage at some point. one of the great things about being involved in this project and just having the zip code plays exist is getting to look at the Los Angeles area where I've lived for over 20 years. I've lived here longer than I've lived anywhere else in my life. But I haven't, it's so spread out. I haven't seen it all still. And one of the great things about just the fact that they exist is that I get to dip into all these areas that I may not have, be super invested in already, but also the Antaeus's commitment to diversity and inclusion in the artists involved means that I get to hear people's work, both playwrights, actors, sound, directing, from a really broad spectrum of people, of creators. And I get to have it all in sort of one place. And I think that's really exciting. So one of the things that Antaeus is doing is these walking tours of the zip codes that are in the zip code plays. And I would love for one for West Hollywood. Certainly there are some fun places to discover in West Hollywood. And certainly there are some places that, let's just say that the straight world may not be quite as privy to in West Hollywood that I would love to let them know about. Like I said earlier, that there's something about West Hollywood where it's sort of in a medium state of crisis, in that the culture of it is slowly being eroded. And so any way that we can keep that, record that, preserve that in amber would be great. So a walking tour. I think what I want the audience to get out of my zip code play is it changed from when I started writing it to today. And I think the big thing I want to get people to get out of it is that it is a person's personal responsibility to acknowledge another person's lived experience, to acknowledge that is valid. It's not your responsibility to understand it 100%. It's not your responsibility to live it. It's not your responsibility really to do anything other than acknowledge that it's real. And in doing that, you give that person the space they need to move about in life with your support. Now, there's obviously action items I feel that, we can do as allies for each other. And those are situational, absolutely. But I think the one main one is you just have to acknowledge that someone else is real. And just because you don't understand it and you haven't lived it doesn't mean that it's not valid and not important, and possibly not more important than your own. So that's what I would hope people would get out of it. And, if it's, everybody wants oh, I hope it starts a conversation. I hope it starts more than a conversation, but it'll start with a conversation. I'm not necessarily looking to change the world, but I am sort of looking to change people's minds. If you liked listening to me prattle on about my play and various other things in theater, you can check out my zip code play and all the rest of the zip code plays from both season 1 and season 2 at antaeus.org. There's also a lot of ways that if you want to support our theater that you can donate, and you can sign up for our newsletter, and we'll let you know the minute you can walk back into the actual building. But in the meantime, please enjoy the Zip Code Plays Season 2 wherever you get your podcasts or radio dramas.